I was still trying to keep up the pretense that...
Sustained.
You said you feared arrest at that point. What was your plan? You talked about earlier about, was this when you decided, well, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to move to Monterey?
No, I knew I'd get arrested or I'd end up probably killing myself. Around that time, no, I hadn't decided yet to move to Monterey, but it came like a few days later.
Okay. Well, we've heard earlier about your conversation with Detective Flores that happened on June 10th. Did you have this conversation after you spoke with Bishop Layton?
Yes, later in the day. I went, I don't know, it was like 3 in the morning that I spoke with Bishop Layton, and I think it was in the afternoon that I spoke with Flores.
Okay. You called him, right?
Yes.
Why?
Leslie encouraged me to, and I thought, she said that
Objection here,
Sustained.
Leslie encouraged you to talk. By Leslie, we're talking about Leslie Jodi?
yes.
You had spoken to her after you learned of, after you spoke to Bishop Layton?
objection made.
Yes,
Okay.
the next day, or later in the day.
Now, when you call Detective Flores, what? Obviously, you just told us, Leslie, Miss Jodi had encouraged you to do so. But beyond that, did you have your own reasons for contacting Detective Flores?
Yes.
And what were those?
I thought that if I didn't call him, it would look more suspicious than if I did call him. So in an effort to pretend like I was never there, I called him.
Okay. Why not call him and tell him what happened?
I was scared to do that. I mean, I just couldn't imagine admitting to something like that. I couldn't even imagine doing something like that.
So you called him to act as if to begin putting up the facade that you had nothing to do with it. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, I began that facade almost right away because I didn't want anyone in Utah to know either, but that's why I called him also.
So to try to continue the facade that you began in Utah, you called Detective Flores.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we talked earlier about a gun you had purchased. We talked about suicide and about a gun you had purchased at, I believe you told us, Don's Sporting Goods, right?
Right.
Okay. And you said you went through a background check and everything. When was it that you purchased that gun?
I think I purchased it on July 1st and took possession of it July 11th, if I remember correctly.
And what kind of gun was this?
9mm.
Now, there is a lot of time between June 10th and early July. 3 weeks or so. Did you make any attempts to kill yourself during those 3 weeks?
No.
During that time period, you also made various calls to Detective Flores.
Yes.
Why were you continuing to do that?
A few reasons. One, I wanted to continue to act like I was participating. And two, I kind of also was calling him to see what information I could garner from him.
Because you wanted to get whatever sense you could of whether you're going to be arrested soon. Is that right?
Rephrase this time.
Would it be fair to say you were trying to see if your arrest was imminent?
I knew it was imminent. I just wanted to see how much, I wanted to try to determine how much time I had.
Given that what you said before about killing yourself and not seeking a gun out until July, you were living at your grandparents' house, you had access to guns, right?
Yes. My parents had guns also.
Well, did you ever contemplate using one of those guns to kill yourself?
No, the idea to use a gun to kill myself didn't really come to me until I had possession of the gun and I realized how easy that could be.
You said it didn't come to your mind until you had possession of the gun. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So it sounds to me like that wasn't, the killing yourself wasn't the reason you purchased this gun, that there must have been some other reason. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. Why were you choosing to purchase this gun at the sporting goods store?
Several reasons. My dad has always owned guns. Daryl has guns. Matt has guns. Most of the men that I've spent time with have guns. My grandfather has guns. It was something that I wanted to someday see myself being a responsible gun owner, and so that was something I'd always thought of doing. Around that time, in the spring, I was working at another restaurant called Purple Plum, and I made friends there. And one of those friends was going out to pan for gold. It sounds silly, but the Klamath River nearby has gold in it still. And we used to go out there and kick up the sediment, and you can see the gold in the water and all that. I was invited out there, and I wanted to go. It would also be a camping trip. At that point, everyone that was on board, except for me, were all men, and even though they were my friends, I didn't want to, I don't know, it just seemed like I knew they drink, you get out there in the middle of nowhere, you have a bunch of drunk guys, one female. I just didn't want to end up in a situation, so I thought it would be good to have the gun with me when I went there, just as general protection anyway, because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. So we were going to go out there and spend the weekend out there at the Klamath River, seeing what we could dig up or in the river, and just camp. And so that was another reason that I wanted to have it right then.
Why? What were you fearful of these people would do something to you?
Well, I mean, it was a bunch of guys, and I mean, I didn't feel as safe anymore.
Around guys?
Yes.
And you say any more, you mean after June 4th?
Definitely after June 4th, yes. And it was kind of a progressive thing, but I didn't feel safe at all after June 4th.
Now, after Travis's death was discovered by the rest of the world, were there services for him, funerals, memorials, things of that nature?
Yes, there was a memorial service at his church in Mesa, and the funeral, I believe, was held in Riverside.
Did you attend either of those?
I tried to attend both, but I only made it to the memorial service
And that was the one in Riverside?
in Mesa.
Mesa. Given what had happened, why did you want to attend those services?
I thought that if I didn't show up, it would look suspicious because Travis and I were close, and a lot of people knew that, and he also told me one time that
Objection, hearsay.
Why did you feel the need? Had you made a promise to him that you would?
the subject of my funeral came up one time, and he said, "I'm sorry, keep forgetting."
Sustained.
And you and Travis had an agreement that you would attend each other's funerals?
Something to that effect. He was going to give a eulogy or something if I ever died.
And keeping that promise or that deal still meant something to you?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Miss Harris, what?
Yes.
Why?
Because he would have come to mine, and even if it was in Antarctica, he told me.
But Jodi, I have to ask, he throws you down on the floor, says, "Fucking kill you, bitch," and you fear for your life. Why doesn't that kind of conduct just kind of throw that promise way out the window?
No, I don't think so, because whenever he lost his temper, he seemed genuinely ashamed about himself afterward, and that's not the kind of person that I believed he was at the core of himself or who he wanted to be, so it wasn't like one of those things.
So you still viewed him as a good person.
Objection, leading.
Rephrase.
Is that correct? That you still viewed him as a good person?
Objection, leading.
I believed in him and that he wanted to be a good person, and
Objection, the only question. She was asked whether or not she did view him as a good person.
Answering, Judge. She's
Overruled. Complete your answer.
I've seen very, very good sides to him, and that was the person that he wanted to be, and that's the person he wanted to embrace. And so, I mean, I've got sides that I'm not proud of, and he did too, and I just figured that's part of being human, and he had really good sides too.
By that point in time, had you forgiven him for attacking you that day?
By the time I went to the services,
Mm-hmm.
I blamed myself. So I didn't know how much there was to forgive, but I had this experience. It sounds silly, but I had this experience.
Was asked if she could win or not.
What was your experience?
I was at the Freeman's house in Gilbert after this service, and I was in the bedroom in the afternoon, just taking time out for myself, away from everybody. And I felt like he was there.
And what did that experience mean to you?
It helped me to know that he was okay and he was at a better place. And maybe that he wasn't mad anymore.
You were at the Freemans in conjunction with his memorial service?
Yes.
After you had that experience, do you forgive yourself for not escaping?
Objections assume facts are evidence that she was escaping.
She's already testified to that,
Judge,
Judge.
I make the objections. The way it works is I make the objections, you
Counsel,
decide.
please approach.
He testified earlier that on June 4th, you didn't feel like you could escape because of an incident in 2007 where he caught you running down the hallway. Is that correct?
Yeah, my intention was to run out of the room, and I didn't make it out.
So in 2008, on June 4th, based on what you said earlier, you didn't consider that a viable option on June 4th. Is that right?
Objection made.
Sustained rephrase.
Did you consider, at the time, did you consider escape and running away as a viable option when he was attacking you?
Not through the bedroom door. I thought I could run into the closet and then run the other way and then maybe get out. It didn't work out that way.
So going back to my question then, when you were at the Freemans and you had this experience, had you forgiven yourself for not trying another option?
No. I didn't.
As we stand here today, years later, have you forgiven yourself for not trying another option?
Objection, relevance.
Approach. May continue.
Jodi, ask my question again. As we stand here today, have you forgiven yourself for not finding another way out of the situation you found yourself in on June 4th?
No, I think that if I had just left before any of that happened, I have a million regrets. I mean, I was scared of him and I reacted, but I will always regret everything about that.
Do you blame yourself for not taking some other alternative measures?
Yes.
You did then and you do now, is that right?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Why do you still feel, given what happened on June 4th, why do you believe now that you realistically even had other options once it started?
Well, maybe if I hadn't, when I grabbed the gun, I didn't mean to fire it. It just went off and that made him even more angry. He just became this volcano. And so I think that if maybe I'd handled it properly, I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten he was already pissed off, but he was raging after that. And I think maybe if I had handled the gun properly and I meant to just point it at him, I thought it would stop him. And maybe he wouldn't have gotten as angry as he did. Maybe he wouldn't have threatened to kill me. I don't know. I have thoughts like that.
And those thoughts were with you after you learned, or you got confirmation from others that he was deceased?
Actually, no, I didn't know that he got shot until Flores told me.
Okay. In terms of your life, the plan you made, you said that you called Detective Flores, and I'm paraphrasing, in an effort to act like you had nothing to hide. When you were living in Wairika, were you trying to put up that same facade?
Yes, I was.
Trying to act as if everything was normal?
Well, it depends on the time period. The first week, yeah, I tried to act like nothing had happened. And then when I talked to Bishop Layton and Dan Freeman, it felt like I had like more freedom to just let it out. At least my emotions.
Because it was known now.
Yes.
And you say let out your emotions. Apart from that initial outburst you talked about after speaking with Bishop Layton, did you have others?
Yeah, I did.
Several?
Usually every night.
Why every night?
Because at night I just lay there and think about stuff. And usually that's when he would call me. And usually when he called me late at night, he was in a good mood. And I just knew that my phone wouldn't ring anymore.
Once you had permission to openly grieve, did you tell your family what happened?
I told them that he died. I didn't tell them anything about me being there.
Did you tell them about the things that you've told us throughout your testimony, about the sexual things and about the violence?
No, I would have never said anything like that.
Why not?
Well, there's several reasons. One, anytime I said something negative about a guy, they hate him thereafter. Two, it's really embarrassing and shameful. Not just the sexual part, but just being in those situations. And it's, in order to understand why I wouldn't talk about anything negative, I don't know if you've heard of, it was a philosophy that I had at the time.
What was the name of that philosophy, Jodi?
It's called the law of attraction. And
Could you just kind of, before you talk about that and the effect on your world at that point in time, could you just explain to us what that law of attraction is?
yes, I mean, you might have heard of it. There was a movie made about it called The Secret. And then after the movie came the book, and it was bestsellers all over. Anyway, so the law of attraction has been around much longer, and it was something that I had briefly studied when I was 19, 20 years old. When I met Travis, he was very much into that, which I liked. And so it became more and more a part of my philosophy and my creed. So anytime I would mention something negative, he would get upset and tell me not to focus on those things. Or one time when we had that really bad fight in the fall when he wouldn't let me leave the room at first, I wrote about some of the things he said, and he found it in my journal, and he would... I'm sorry.
Ask another question.
How did the law of attraction, you said Travis introduced you to this law.
Well, I sort of knew partly about it, but he introduced me to the movie that they made about it called The Secret.
And that was The Secret?
Yes.
Okay. And from what you described, part of the law of attraction involves not putting forth any negative thoughts, is that
It's
correct?
yeah, it's like what you put out there is what you get back. You're not supposed to think about, speak about, read about, write about, talk about negative things. Otherwise, those things will be brought into your life more.
And what you were explaining to us is that Travis would assert that law as the reason for preventing you from writing negative things in your journal?
Yes. Oh. Yes, that's correct.
And explain to us then, you mentioned the law of attraction and putting things out there. What was that, the meaning of that to you as it related to my question about saying anything negative about Travis to your family?
I never said anything negative about Travis ever to anyone, except one time with Matt. So I didn't want to say anything negative to my family about him either. I didn't want to say anything negative about him at all, especially now. I didn't want anybody to know those aspects.
When you say didn't want anyone to know those aspects, what do you mean?
I definitely didn't want, I promised I wouldn't say anything about his other issues, which I didn't ever want that to ever come out, but
His other issues, just please, what are we talking about?
his, I don't know how else to call it, his sexual problems. And then I definitely didn't want anyone at this point to know the level of violence that had been in our relationship, because I thought that that would be construed as motive to kill him.
Okay. Remember the day you were arrested?
Yes.
What were you doing on that day before you were arrested?
The day before?
No, on that day
Oh, okay. Before.
before you were arrested.
I was getting ready to move some things down to Monterey. I was going to be gone for a few days. So my dad took me to the south end of town to get a car rental at that time. I didn't have my Infiniti was gone by this point, so I couldn't drive to Reading and get a cheaper car rental. So he drove me to the south end of town. I got a rental, came back, put some things in the car. I still had some things of Matt's from like 10 years prior. So I was putting some of those in the car to get to him. He'd been wanting, they were old books. And I took a shower, and then my grandma told me that there was a police officer here, or at the house.
Let me ask you this, do you recall this gun you bought at the sporting goods store? Do you recall if you had it in your possession at that time or not?
I did. It was in the car.
Okay. After you were arrested, we saw that. Did Detective Flores arrest you?
I think Officer Potter put the handcuffs on me. I don't remember the handcuffs going on, but he was the one that came to the door.
Okay. But after you were arrested, you spoke with Detective Flores that day, right?
Yes.
At this point in time, on the day you were arrested, you've had several phone conversations with Detective Flores, right?
Yes.
And we heard evidence that you also went to the Mesa Police Department, gave your DNA and fingerprints. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Had you met Detective Flores in person prior to the day of your arrest?
Yes.
Okay. When you were arrested, and questioned by Detective Flores, and that was the interview you were still wearing. You were wearing a t-shirt and pants before you were took to the jail, is that right?
Yeah, jeans and a t-shirt.
Okay. Why didn't you tell him what happened on June 4th? Why did you deny being there?
The main reason is because I was very ashamed of what had happened. It's not anything I ever imagined doing. It's not the kind of person that I was. It was just shameful. I didn't want anyone to know that I had anything to do with that, because it's very much not me, and it was shameful. And I was also very scared of what might happen. I didn't want my family to know that I'd done that. And I just couldn't bring myself to say that I did that.
So on that day, based on what we saw on the tape, you made the choice to deny being there altogether, right?
Yes.
Were you thinking that that would make you appear innocent, or what was the thinking with that untruth?
It was more like, I didn't understand any of these procedures. I just have always heard, don't admit to anything kind of thing. That's what an attorney advised me to do. So I just denied it. I guess I didn't understand that I could just be quiet and not say anything at all.
Had you been interrogated by a police officer before?
No.
You speak with Detective Flores again the next day in Wairika. You recall doing that?
Yeah, first I talked to Detective Blaney and then Flores.
Now, when you spoke to Detective Flores on that second occasion, you told him you were confronted, weren't you, with evidence that, in fact, you were there,
Right.
weren't you? Okay. Then you told him another lie, right?
Yes.
What did you tell him?
I began to tell him things that I thought would comport with what their forensics would show, as well as create like not an excuse, but create a way for me to not have been responsible for it.
So in that regard, you tell him a story about a man and woman breaking into the bathroom. Why did you come up with the story? Let's start. Why did your story include the idea that there were two intruders?
There were two people there that day. I don't know. It just seemed like, and everyone was saying, oh, one person.
You're saying recommendation violence.
Approach.
Why did you create a scenario in which two individuals conducted this attack?
Prior to my arrest, there were a lot of rumors flying around, and Flores told me repeatedly that it had to have been more than one person.
Why do you come up with any particular reason why you come up with a man and a woman for this lie?
I mean, it sounds a little esoteric, but I think it could have been symbolically like Travis and I. We were the ones fighting that day. I don't really know, to be honest.
Okay. You know, when you did this second interview, you had some time to think and get your bearings. When you were creating this lie to tell Detective Flores the next day, did you contemplate telling him the truth?
I contemplated it. I wanted to, but I wasn't nowhere near ready to tell anyone that I was capable of something like that.
Were you in a state of mind where you could have told Detective Flores everything? The sex, the lurid sexual interest, the lurid sexual behavior. Did you want to tell him about that?
No way. He's Mormon. It just was all the more shameful.
What about Travis? Did you still want to protect him, his memory?
I was very concerned about both of our reputations, and I didn't want to start throwing him under the bus, so to speak. I didn't want to say negative things about him now, because there were a lot of people already hurting, and I didn't see what benefit it would be to talk about any of those things.
What do you mean, what benefit? What benefit to whom?
To anybody. It would just cause more pain. I didn't see what benefit it would be to anybody to talk about these things. Now, I mean, this is stuff that Travis didn't want anyone to know about. These are things that I didn't want to tell anybody about. I certainly didn't want to tell Detective Flores about all the times that he was violent, because then I thought that they would think that that would be motive, and I didn't want. Travis and I considered us friends, and then when he got that way, and then we got over it, and I wanted to portray the appearance that he and I were friends, which we were when we were getting along. We were just fine, and then, like, that whole day was fine. And then it just flipped.
What about the benefit to you to telling Detective Flores the reality of what happened in your relationship?
I didn't see any benefit to doing that.
Was Travis, at this point in time, was Travis's image more important to you than your own future?
It certainly was. I didn't feel like I had a future anyway. So there's no reason to take him down, his reputation, just because I'm down.
What's that?
I didn't think there was any reason to start opening up that door when there's just no reason. I didn't have a future. There was no benefit to me. There was no benefit, certainly no benefit to anyone else to say those things.
You had mentioned earlier, in accordance with the purchase of the gun, and that you said, well, once you had the gun, you realized it'd be so easy to just pull the trigger. When you were saying these things to Detective Flores and in Wairika, did you have plans of killing yourself?
Yes, they weren't set in stone, but I really, really wanted to. I was concerned about how it would affect my family, obviously. But I just wanted to die.
Did you take steps to make that happen?
In California, after I was arrested, I did.
What'd you do?
At that point, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about prior to my arrest, but I did actually decide I was going to definitely kill myself.
After your arrest?
Yeah, that was idea. What I did was you can purchase different things in jail. So I bought a bunch of Advil. I'd had surgery one time in the past, and I was told by that doctor that not to take any Advil because it's an anticoagulant. So I thought, okay. I bought a whole bunch of Advil. I took it all over the next few days so that it was in my system. And they have razors there for shaving, double-bladed razors that you're allowed to just keep with you. And I took it apart one night with intentions of slitting my wrists. There are other inmates that work there. We're all housed together. It's a very tiny jail, tiny town, tiny county. And they work laundry, and so they would bring back tons of laundry for anybody. And so I had asked for extra laundry so I could stuff it around my body because there was somebody sleeping below me, and I didn't want anything to get on her. So I stuffed it around my body and got under my blankets with my razor after everyone went to sleep. I never did it, obviously. I'm still here, but I was getting comfortable, and as I was moving around, I nicked my wrist with the razor on accident. It was more like a paper cut. It just stung so bad, and I sat there, and I couldn't bring myself to do it, and I was really pissed at myself because I just wanted to be done. I wanted to be done. I wanted to be dead before Travis's birthday.
Travis's what?
His birthday.
And what was his birthday?
July 28th.
July what?
28th.
Okay. So, am I correct then? Your thinking was you're going to tell this story, doesn't involve exposing anything, and then you're going to kill yourself, and it's all just done. Is that right?
Objection as an answer, meeting.
Overruled.
Yes, that way I would never have to admit to it, or my family wouldn't have to know that I did that, and everyone that loved him was going to believe what they would believe regardless. So I was thinking that there's nothing I could do about that, but just thinking more along the lines of I didn't want my mom to know, or my brothers, or my sister.
Okay. Jodi, apart from the police interviews, we've come to understand throughout this trial that you spoke with the media as well. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
And without going into the details right now, do you remember, did you reach out to them? Any media outlet, or did they reach out to you?
They reached out to my family.
And when we're saying they reached out to your family, who was it that reached out to your family?
CBS.
Was there a particular person that reached out to your family that worked for CBS?
Yes, his name's Jonathan Leach.
Did Mr. Leach, well, let me ask you this. Did Mr. Leach come visit you in jail?
He did.
And to your understanding, was it his purpose in coming to see you at the jail to try to get you to participate in an interview with him?
Yes. Well, not with him, but with CBS.
Okay. And did you decide to participate in the interview?
Eventually I did, yes.
Why did you said eventually, did you initially decline?
My first instinct was absolutely not. I got a bad feeling, and then after contemplating it for a little while, they made contact with my family the very next day after I failed to kill myself. So I thought, maybe this is a sign that I'm meant to do something like that first, and then kill myself. I saw it as an opportunity, not just to, I mean, I didn't know, I hadn't told my family about these phantom intruders. I just thought they would eventually hear about it. And so I had friends and other people asking questions, or that maybe didn't even know about my situation. I didn't want to be known or remembered as somebody that could be capable of what happened. So I wanted to present a different picture of myself.
Judge, could we take a moment? I want to approach. These, I'm trying to get, I'm hoping that you can give us a little better understanding. These media interviews you decide to do, or this initial interview you decide to do, you're trying, you believe, you want this story out there in the public?
Well, there was more motivation than just that. Jonathan had told me that Travis's friends and loved ones were all participating, and it would just be their side if I didn't say anything. So there was that as well. I wanted the world to believe that I loved him and I didn't have anything against him. And that I wanted the world to perceive me as just a normal person.
Why was that important to you?
I don't know. My reputation used to be very important to me. I think it had to do with a lot of the fact that I didn't feel very good about myself, and I portrayed one image to people of somebody who was responsible and mature and collected and sweet and nice, and behind the scenes I'm just falling apart, and I didn't want people to know that about me. I just wanted to get on there and just show people that I was not angry. I didn't hate him. It wasn't anything like that. And I also felt at that point that I made up this big stupid story for Flores and that I should stick with that. And I stuck with it for a long time.
Okay. So after this initial contact by Mr. Leach, do you have any idea in terms of time how much later you actually interviewed with him or with CBS?
It was pretty quickly after. I think it might have been in August 2008. And
Now,
then,
this did you do more than one interview with CBS?
yes,
Okay. The initial interview, where did that take place?
it took place at the Siskiyou County Jail.
And who was interviewing you then?
Jonathan Leach was.
Okay. You said that this contact happened, if I understood you correctly, the day after this failed suicide attempt. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The contact, not the interview.
Right. Was the plan then to do these interviews and then kill yourself, or did the suicide get put on hold?
No, the suicide kept getting put on hold, but my plan was to not be around by the time it aired. That's my hope.
And after this initial interview, did you interview with 48 Hours again?
Yes.
And was that with Mr. Leach again?
No.
Who was that with?
Her name's Maureen. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I could spell it.
Okay. Well, why don't you spell it for us if you remember?
Maher.
So if you speak to, I'm going to use Ms. Maurer. Where are you when you have this interview with her?
By this point, it's September 2008, and I'm here in Siskiyou County, at the jail here. Here in Maricopa County.
I want to ask you a few things about these interviews. Why in these interviews did you describe your childhood as almost ideal?
I felt it was.
Actually, assumes facts not in evidence.
Rephrase, sustained.
When you were speaking with Ms. Maurer, did you describe your childhood as almost being ideal?
Objection leading.
Yes,
Why?
I felt it was until a certain age. I think almost all good memories from age as early as I can remember until 7. I remember like one or two negative things. It was a great childhood up to that point. I had my brother, I had my pets. Like I said, I had places to play. I had lots of little friends at school, that kind of thing.
That was part of it, right? And
That's-
that idealness?
Yeah, that was part of it.
You didn't tell her the other part.
Well, I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to say anything bad about anything, about my family, about Travis, about myself. I didn't want anyone to know about other negative aspects of my upbringing. And I sugarcoated everything that I said. Everything was rosy. That's how I said it.
Including your relationship with Travis?
Yes. I glossed over the negative things. I mean, they got a quick mention, but I glossed over them.
Were you asked during these interviews if you'd ever been physically abused by Travis?
Yes.
Do you remember how you responded to those questions?
Yeah, I wasn't specific. I didn't go into a lot of detail. I just said a few very minimal things and shrugged it off as nothing big, not a big deal.
Why?
Again, I didn't want people to know the level of violence that our relationship had reached at a couple of points, and I thought again that would be construed as a possible reason for me having killed him.
Having what?
Killed him.
You mentioned, well, let me ask you this. During these interviews with Miss Maurer, the sexual aspect of your relationship, do you recall whether the sexual aspect of your relationship was spoken about?
Yes, it was.
Why was it okay at that point in time to talk about those issues with Miss Maurer?
Well, I didn't go into detail with those either. Just, I knew there were some things that were already known and in evidence, and so I figured, well, I'll just give them a brief mention because she had asked about them. They were in police reports or something like that she had read. So I didn't tell about all these graphic things that we'd done, or I just sort of hinted at it like we were just two adults and things were consensual and it was what it was.
You said that certain things were already known. Are you referencing the pictures that Detective Flores showed you during his interviews with you?
Yeah, the pictures that were found on the camera.
The naked pictures of you.
Yes.
During your phone calls with Detective Flores, you also admitted that there was a sexual relationship between you and Mr. Alexander, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that at that time?
I thought that it would establish that I knew him very well, that we were close, and that, I don't know, that I just, that I might be able to, I don't know, I wanted him to know that I was close with him and that we were, I didn't want him to know that we were like doing all this stuff, but just that there was no malice there.
Had you, before you told Detective Flores, after June 10th when you learned about Mr. Alexander's death, and the time you told Detective Flores about your sexual relationship, had you confessed that sexual relationship to other persons?
Yes.
Why did you choose, the cat was somewhat out of the bag as it related to your sexual relationship. Why did you choose to minimize it during all these interviews?
Well, because I didn't want to get explicit. I mean, I confessed to my bishop, and I mean, it wasn't a secret, but it wasn't widely known either. And I also didn't want, I just didn't want people to know, like, it's embarrassing, really, is why I didn't want to get into detail about it.
To your understanding at the time that you spoke with Miss Maurer, were there, did the evidence exist about the Spider-Man underwear? Did the text messages exist about him calling you a whore? Was any of that stuff, to your knowledge, something that anyone knew about?
I didn't think anyone would know about the Spider-Man underwear because it had been months since we had texted about that or talked about that. I knew that some of those mean emails were still in my account. I didn't know about his. I figured they would be found eventually. So, I mean, I didn't have any knowledge of them knowing about it at this point, but I assumed they did.
Okay. Earlier in this trial, we heard the phone sex conversation you recorded with Mr. Alexander. Was that on the phone that you had in your possession while you were arrested?
No.
So to your belief, no one knew about that either, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
I didn't know about that tape.
Right.
I hoped. I didn't know where my phone was.
What's that?
So that was my hope.
Okay.
Anyway.
Why do you continue when you speak with Miss Maurer? Why do you continue what we call the intruder story?
I wanted to remain consistent with what I told Flores, and I certainly was in no place in my head to admit to any involvement.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the afternoon recess. Please be back in the jury room at 3:20. We will start promptly at that time. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Please back to the jury. Please be seated. Ms. Arias, you may step down. Counsel, please approach. We are in recess.